Chapter 7 The Cid is Banished. Soon after this, Don Alfonso was crowned king of Castile, Leon, Galicia, and Portugal, and he called himself Emperor of all Spain, as his father had done. He proved to be in every respect a good king, and he established poor and rich alike in security, and no man dared take arms against another under penalty of having his eyes put out. In his reign, a man could go from one end of his dominions to the other, carrying gold and silver, and be unmolested. Merchants and pilgrims were likewise protected. Don Alfonso was also a friend to the poor, and a just judge, and a defender of the churches. At this time, there was a quarrel between the Cid and Count Garcia Ordóñez, and the Cid gathered his followers and went into the Count's territory, burning and plundering. He also laid siege to the castle of Faro, which belonged to Count Garcia, and took it. He then sent messengers to the Count, saying that he would wait 7 days for him to come and give battle. But though many men gathered about the Count, they were afraid to go out against the Cid. In the 2nd year of the reign of the king Don Alfonso, the Moorish king of Cordova made war upon al-Maimon, king of Toledo, the friend of Alfonso. After doing much harm in his territory, this king of Cordova laid siege to the city of Toledo. Then Don Alfonso gathered a great army and went to the help of his friend. But when al-Maimon heard of his coming with such a host, he was afraid, thinking Don Alfonso was going to help his enemies in the siege. So al-Maimon sent messengers to remind him of their friendship and of their oath. But Don Alfonso kept his messengers and sent no answer, but went on marching into the country. When the king of Cordova knew Alfonso was coming, he took his army and fled. Now Alfonso took 5 of his knights and the messengers of al-Maimon and rode to Toledo, and when they came to the gate, he entered and sent word to the king that he was coming. When al-Maimon heard this, he would not wait for a horse, but went on foot and met Alfonso, and they embraced each other. And the king of Toledo was filled with joy at seeing his friend, and he was glad for what he had done to help Alfonso when he was in trouble, and thanked him for his loyalty in coming to his help. That whole night they rejoiced together, and the people of Toledo were glad that al-Maimon had such a friend. But the Castilians were sad, for they thought their king would be harmed by the Moors. On the next day, Alfonso asked al-Maimon to go with him to Olias, to his camp, and see the host he had brought to his help. So al-Maimon went with only a few of his followers, and when the Castilians saw their king again, they rejoiced. The 2 kings went through the camp, and then they sat down to eat in a large tent of Alfonso. While they were there, Alfonso gave a secret order that 500 knights should surround the tent, and when the king of Toledo saw these armed men, he was afraid, and asked Alfonso what it meant. But Alfonso said for him to eat, and then he would tell him. When they had eaten, Alfonso said to al-Maimon, "When you had me in Toledo, you made me swear that I would never do you any evil. Now, when you are in my power, I ask that you release me from that promise." Al-Maimon said he would do so, but begged him to do no wrong. Then Alfonso took the Gospels and said, "Now that you are in my power, I swear to never go against you nor against your son, and to help you against all other men in the world. I promise this because my other oath was made under compulsion, when I was in your hands. but now I freely promise." And he swore on the Gospels to do as he said. At this, al-Maimon was greatly rejoiced, and they remained together all that night. And on the next day, Alfonso took his army, and al-Maimon his own, and they went together against the king of Cordova, who had besieged Toledo. And they burned towns, and destroyed castles, and plundered everywhere, so that the king of Cordova never dared again to attack the king of Toledo. Shortly after this, Alfonso ordered the Cid to challenge a knight of Navarre, called Ximen Garcia de Fioglas, as the king claimed certain castles which this man held. The Cid overcame this knight, and gained for the king 3 castles. The Cid also fought in Medina Celi against a Moorish knight, who was called Faras, and he slew him also. In the 5th year of the reign of Alfonso, he sent the Cid to the kings of Seville and Cordova to receive tribute from them. Now there was war between the Moorish kings Almocanis of Seville and Almondafar of Granada, and there were with Almondafar certain men of Castile, helping him in his battles, Count Don Garcia Ordóñez, and Fortun Sanchez, and Lope Sanchez, and Diego Perez. These men fought against the king of Seville, who was Alfonso's vassal. This matter troubled the Cid greatly, and he asked these men not to fight against the king of Seville, saying that if they did, King Alfonso would have to defend him. However, the king of Granada and his knights paid no attention to the letters of the Cid, but entered the land of Seville as far as Cabra, and burned and plundered as they went. When the Cid knew this, he gathered as many followers as he could, and went against them, and fought with them nearly a whole day, and he slew many of the followers of the king of Granada, and at length put them all to flight. He took as prisoners Count Garcia Ordóñez, and Lope Sanchez, and Diego Perez, and others without number, and he left a great multitude dead on the field, and took much spoil. The Cid held his prisoners for 3 days, and then set them free, and he returned to Seville with great riches and honor. Then King Almocanis of Seville received him with joy, and gave him riches for himself, and paid him the tribute for the king, Don Alfonso. Don Alfonso was pleased with this deed of the Cid, and his other achievements, but there were many who tried to set the king against him. Some time after this, the Moors began to make trouble, and Don Alfonso gathered his army and went against them. But the Cid was sick and could not go at this time. While the king was in Andalusia, a great host of Moors assembled on the other side and entered the country, and laid siege to the castle of Gormaz. By this time the Cid felt his strength return, and hearing the Moors were in the country, he gathered what men he could, and went after them. But the Moors were so afraid that they began to fly. The Cid followed them as far as Toledo, slaying and killing, and he took 7,000 prisoners. Then he and his people returned with great spoils and honor. When the king of Toledo heard of the Cid's deeds of burning and destroying in his country, he sent a complaint to Don Alfonso, and the king was much distressed. Then the Cid's enemies, who were about Alfonso, said, "You see, the Cid has broken your oath to the king of Toledo, and he has done this, that the king of Toledo may come here to fight against us and slay us all." This the king believed, as he had no love for the Cid, since he had made him take the oath 3 times that he had not been guilty of the death of Don Sancho. So he hastened to Burgos, and sent for the Cid to come to him. Now the Cid knew that the king did not feel kindly to him, and he made answer that he would meet Alfonso between Burgos and Vivar, his own town. When they had met there, the Cid went up and would have kissed the hand of the king, but Alfonso would not permit this, but said to him, "Sir, leave my land." Then the Cid put spurs to his mule, and rode to a piece of ground, which was his inheritance, and answered, "I am not in your land, but in my own." But the king answered angrily, "Go out of my kingdom at once." The Cid replied, "Give me 30 days' time, which is my right as a knight." The king said he would not, but if he were not gone in 9 days, he would go and look for him. The Cid's enemies about the king were pleased at this, but the people were very sorry. Thus Alfonso and the Cid parted. Then the Cid called for all his friends and relatives and vassals, and told them Alfonso had banished him, and asked if they would follow him. Then his cousin Alvar Fanez answered, "Cid, we will go with you wherever you go, and never fail you, and we will spend for you our wealth, and our mules and horses, and while we live, will be your loyal friends and followers." All the others agreed to what Alvar had said, and the Cid thanked them, and said there would come a time when he could reward them. As the Cid was about to depart, he looked towards his home, and saw it deserted, the doors open, the chests unfastened, no seats in the porch, no hawks upon the perches, and tears came into his eyes, and he said, "My enemies have done this." Then he knelt down and prayed that he might be given strength to destroy all the Moors, and to win enough to reward his friends and all his followers. He called Alvar to him and said, "Cousin, the poor have no part in the wrong the king has done us. See that no wrong be done to them." An old woman who was standing at her door said, "Friends, we shall return to Castile with great honor and riches." As they went out from Vivar, they saw a crow to their right, and when they came to Burgos, they saw a crow to the left, and these they considered good signs. The Cid entered Burgos with 60 banners. The people of the town stood at their windows as he passed, and wept, saying, "How good a vassal he is, if he had a good master!" And they would gladly have asked him into their houses, but they did not dare break the command of the king, for Don Alfonso had sent letters saying that if anyone gave the Cid lodging, he should lose all he had, and have his eyes put out. Then the Cid went to his own door, and found it fastened, for fear of the king. His people called, but there was no answer from within. The Cid rode to the door, and gave it a kick with his foot, but it did not break, for it was strongly fastened. Then a little girl came from one of the houses and said, "O Cid, the king has forbidden us to receive you. We dare not open the doors, lest we lose our heads, and all that we have, and our eyes." When the Cid heard what the king had done, he went to the church, and there knelt down and prayed. He then mounted his horse, and rode from the town, and pitched his tent upon the sands, because there was no one who would receive him within his door. The king had also commanded that no one in Burgos should sell him or his men food, but a nephew of the Cid, named Martin Antolines, supplied the company with bread and wine. This man said, "Cid, we will rest here tonight, and tomorrow we will go away. I shall be accused for what I have done for you, but by following you I shall after a while have the king for my friend, and if not, I do not care a fig for what I leave behind." And the Cid said to him, "You are a bold lancer. If I live, I will pay you double. You see, I have nothing with me, and yet must have money for my followers. I will take 2 chests and fill them with sand. And do you go secretly to the Jews Rachel and Vitus, and tell them to come privately to me, and say to them that I cannot take my treasures with me because of their weight, but I wish to leave them in their hands for a small sum of money. Let them come for the chests at night. I say to you, I do this thing from necessity, but I shall redeem the boxes honestly." Now, Rachel and Vitus were rich Jews, to whom the Cid had been accustomed to bring the spoils he got in war, and to receive money for them. Martin went to these men, and taking them to a place where he could talk with them privately, he said, "Promise not to reveal what I say to Moor or Christian, and I will make you rich men forever. The Cid has 2 full chests of gold, but as the king is angry with him, he cannot carry them away without being seen. He wishes to leave them with you, and have you lend him money on them, if you will swear not to open them for a year." Then the 2 Jews consulted together and answered, "We know the Cid got riches among the Moors, and we will keep the chests. But how much money does he wish from us, and what interest will he pay?" Martin said he needed 600 marks, and this the Jews agreed to advance. So they took horses and rode away. They did not cross the bridge, but forded the stream, so that no one should see them, and they came to the tent of the Cid. In the meanwhile, the Cid had taken the 2 chests that were covered with red leather and gold, and bound with iron, and each fastened with 3 locks, and he filled them with sand. When Rachel and Vitus had entered his tent, they kissed his hand, and the Cid smiled, saying, "I am banished from the land by the king, but I have something to leave with you." Then the Jews agreed to lend him the 600 marks, and to not open the chests for a year. Martin said they should now take the chests, and he would go with them and bring the money, as the Cid wished soon to depart. So they took hold of the chests, and found them so heavy they could not lift them, and they were greatly pleased at their bargain. But Martin and his people helped them, and went with them to their home, where they placed the chests in safety, and gave Martin the marks in silver and gold, and he loaded his money on 5 of his men to carry. When this was done, Martin said to the Jews, "You see, I got these chests for you, and I deserve a pair of hose." And the Jews said to each other, "Let us give him a good gift for what he has done." And they gave him 30 marks to buy a hose and a doublet and a cloak. Don Martin thanked them and took the marks and went away joyfully. When Martin had returned to the Cid's camp, they took their horses, and all the company set off, except Martin, who said he would follow them later, but he must first see his wife. At daybreak the Cid came to St. Pedro's, where his own wife and children were, and the abbot received him joyfully. The Cid told them all that he was a banished man, and then he gave the abbot 50 marks for himself, and 100 for the Cid's wife, Donna Ximena, and his children. And he said, "Abbot, I leave my wife and children in your care, and when this money is gone, supply them abundantly, and for every mark you spend, I will give the monastery 4. The abbot promised to do this with a right good will. Then the Cid's wife came up with her children in her arms, and she knelt before him, weeping bitterly, saying, "Now you are banished, and here I am with your little daughters. Tell me, what shall we do?" The Cid took the children in his arms, and held them to his heart and wept, for he loved them dearly. And he said, I shall yet live to give these daughters in marriage, and to serve you, whom I love as my own soul. That day a great feast was made in the monastery in the honor of the Cid, and the bells rang merrily. When the people of Castile learned that the Cid was banished, they were filled with sorrow, and many left their houses and their honors to follow him. That day 115 knights came with Martin to join the Cid, and when he saw such a company coming, he rejoiced, and rode out to meet them, and they kissed his hand. 6 days of the 9 that were allowed the Cid to stay in Don Alfonso's kingdom were now gone, and if after the 9 days he was found within the king's dominions, he would be attacked. That day they feasted, and in the evening the Cid divided all his money among his followers, and said they would meet early in the morning and depart. So long before daybreak the abbot said prayers, and then all left the church and took horse. The Cid embraced his wife and daughters and blessed them, and their parting was like taking the nail from the finger, and the Cid wept and looked around after them. Then Alvar Fanez came up to him and said, Where is your courage, Cid? Think of our journey now. Your sorrow will yet be turned to joy. And Alvar said to the abbot, If you see any who care to follow us, tell them our road, and bid them hasten, that they may reach us. Then they put spurs to their horses and hastened away. That night they passed at Spinar de Can, and many people joined them, and on the next day they passed the borders of Castile, and they went by the Calzada de Quinea, and crossed the river Douro on rafts. That night, being the 8th, they rested at Figueroa, and many more men joined them. There the Cid had a vision while he was asleep. As it is said, the angel of Gabriel appeared to him, saying, Go on boldly, and fear nothing, for everything shall go well with you as long as you live, and all that you begin shall end well, and you shall be rich and honored. Then the Cid awoke and knelt down and thanked God for his mercy, as he was made glad by the vision. Early on the next morning they started again, this being the last day of 9, and they went on toward the Sierra de Maids, and before sunset the Cid halted his company and counted them, finding that he had 300 men with horses and lances, and a great many foot soldiers. He ordered them to eat, as he said they must pass the mountain that night to get out of King Alfonso's dominions, for on the morrow they might be attacked. After having eaten, they hastened onward, and passed the Sierra that night.